Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I feel like it's been a long time since we've gotten together. Have we even had an August chat this month, or has August just been way too busy for us? We might have had one post vacation, I feel like, a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure, though. I can't. It all is blurred together, but it is the last official business day of August. You'll have to forgive us. It's Labor Day weekend, so Colton is home. If you hear him in the background, he's just singing along to every song on TV. I don't know if you can or not, but if you can jam with him. We've just come back. We want to do a South American update, specifically focus on Brazil, because I have been doing this for 21 years now, and I have never been so confused in my life by what the heck is going on down there. Honestly, so we'll just dive right in. Eduardo, I'm gonna dealer's choice. If you do you want to start with corn or soybeans, I'll let you pick. What's going on down there? And I said I'll let you pick, but let's start with corn first. What's going on in the corn market down that way?
Yeah, corn, Brazil remain very, very expensive. Now more expensive than a month ago because of the FX. So this is a very big surprise. How our currency, the real, is so strong against the dollar, including all things. For example, yesterday Lula applied for a force majeure in terms of we can respond to the US as the same coin. So that should be not good for Brazil overall, Brazilian assets, but nobody cares. It's very strange. Then the real is very strong. Our freight are not so cheap, like the last year. In terms of dollars, dollar is expensive because last year the exchange rate started moving up very fast from 550, which is close to this week. This week is testing the lowest point of the year for 540. But then last year, in the end of the year, six above six. So that helped Brazil to export to increase the competitiveness. But this year, it has been very difficult. And then the answer is, so we don't know about the crop tradings that we follow. They um, continue with suffering a crop size around 150 million tons up to 120 million tons. So pretty big, 20 million tons more than last year. And the point is, the farmer selling it's not so bad. It's 1.5, 1.4 million tons per week. It's good. But which is clear is at this level and this rhythm, um, it's not enough to put pressure on replacement cost. But FOB levels dropped 10, 15 cents to compete with Argentina or vice versa, because Brazil is losing some demands, North Africa, for example, Morocco. So and Iran is not so active like June and July. Probably waiting for the Ukraine crop. The FOB level dropped, but the replacement is still the same, very expensive. And the difference, it was 30 cents per bushel, now it's 50 cents. So the pain of the exporters is increasing.
So it's 800 million bushels more, basically 20 million metric tons. I'm doing rough math,
Okay?
750 million, give or take. Um, where is it? Like, where is it?
On the
Like,
on the
shouldn't
farm.
we be seeing piles of corn? Like, did we have that much additional space built with these ethanol plants? Like, I feel like to have 800 million bushels of additional harvest come off in a 2, 3 month window, like we should have at least seen something, right? Like basis is weakened a little bit, but that's more, you know, whatever. But like last week you had it, or this week so far, I'm just kind of quoting your commentary from the this morning or yesterday afternoon, right? 1 million metric ton of farmer selling, 70% of it bought by the domestic market. Like, are we just putting it into animals and it's disappearing? Like, or is there a cave I don't know about somewhere? Like it, where is it? I just feel so confused.
This is a very important point. Last week, I was in an interview, and there was a another guy from logistics, and this guy was telling to everyone Brazil's because of the logistics and so on. So prove to me, and then I will pay. I'll buy you a beer. Um, the point is, most of the elevators in Brazil, the turnover, it's at least 2 times or 3 times. In Mato Grosso, for example, at this time of the year, it's very normal. The farmer selling of the soybean around 90%. So there's no beans anymore. Then they free all the space to corn. And the other point, which is I think it's a something new and structural change, is the capacity of receiving corn from the interior. For example, just 2 examples. In 163 highway in in Mato Grosso, we have the two very big players, ethanol plants, Impasa and FS. These two companies, they can receive per day 150,000 tons per day. And the other is Rumo, which is in Rondonópolis, south of, and then that goes to Santos. It's a railway, plus more 150,000 tons. So 3 companies, they can receive 300,000 tons. And all Mato Grosso, I would say 1 million ton per day. And the harvest in Mato Grosso is around 1 million per day, because it takes 40 days, 45 days, and the crop size is 55 million tons. So there is no pressure anymore. If ports are okay in terms of waiting time, and this year it has been very good in terms of efficiency, then the flow is very important. And then all that piles that we see on the ground, then it's a just for a few days, put there and then move very fast.
It's amazing to think about. I mean, obviously the industry has been incentivized to do that. But once it's put away, it makes it that much harder to get out, right? Like, so does the market feel heavy to you? Does it feel like where are you sitting when it comes to exports now for the crop year? We went, the USDA was at 43 million metric tons, right? For the most part, I think you were kind of in that 40. The industry kind of felt like it was in a 40. You'd kind of indicated maybe 38. Is it 42? Is it 35? Does it land in that 38? Do you think Brazil has corn that it dumps into the global market and completely washes out the US program eventually, or is this a slow thing that we see happen?
The window is closing because 40 million tons is still possible.
Okay.
August was very good in
Yeah.
terms of shipment. September should be good, but October, November, December is very open, and there is no demand. Demand is indicating very levels, waiting for Argentina, Brazil, and the U.S. Gulf. So they know all the regions have a lot of corn to move, and probably this is going to be cheaper than the levels and flat price, because we have a lot of destination price, only flat price, and then they think the board is too expensive. Yeah, reasonable assumption. Then they are waiting and buying hand to mouth. And the point in Brazil is the cost of the corn and everything else. So they are losing a lot of money, more than last year. The point is soybean now it's not good in terms of um, um, we can't make money selling to China at this level because it dropped very fast. So I don't know. Probably they will keep selling corn, but the program should be lower. If we have a, higher effects, then uh, could help us. But you know,
Could
we
change it.
can't bet
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, we'll have to see because
So
we did
good to
see
US in the end, I think.
that's Lula did mention that he wanted to take time today. I think he said today, maybe this was yesterday though. Take time on the negotiations and all. I think that's really what probably impacts you would think the FX, but at the same time, we also have the whole Fed uh independence questions and all of
Yeah,
those fun
and so on.
fun things.
Goldman Sachs recommended Brazil. So,
Yeah.
and in
There's,
the end of the next year, probably BRL will be below 5. I don't believe that. Goldman
That
Sachs.
would be crazy though
So move
if
to Brazil, and then you see if you have Lula again, and probably 6 would be my
right.
guess.
Brazil equities have done very well this year. I mean,
Yeah.
Brazil's done quite well. Mhm.
It is surprising. It definitely has an influence. Is there anything that you guys want to touch on the corn side before we move over to beans or some other things?
Yeah, so like Argentina, real quick,
Yeah.
they've started registrations again, and kind of from a tax perspective, the 25-30% oilseed complex is still going to keep a decent amount of that trade in the kind of black gray market, and farmers will want to move, the grains here first, just from a cash perspective. So, and this little bit of a scandal in Argentina has weakened the currency. So, I don't think it's going to amount to anything. No one's really sure.
What's the scandal? Spill the tea.
So there's a couple like families that are politically very powerful, Menem being one, and so there was a recording, and it involved the drug purchasing for the pension, and basically it looks like what probably happened is that there was corruption, and they probably didn't find it fast enough, and then they kind of tried to release this to make it look like it was the melee involved, but there's always culpability if something bad's going on and you didn't catch it. So. But it doesn't look like it's going to turn into anything. Like the betting markets aren't, there's no rise in Melee not being there. But it's just, certainly a distraction in front of the upcoming Buenos Aires and then October elections. But I don't think it turns into much. But the one thing it's done is the farmers, their income in pay local terms, from July just kind of keeps rising. And this goes back to like the economics of where we're at. So last 4 weeks have probably been the third, fourth wettest in the nucleo zone in the last 40 years. And you've got a lot of rain. I think you're looking at 40 to 50, so almost 2 inches in the next couple
Nice.
of days. So this will be by far the best start since around 2015, 16
Yeah.
for farmers. So all these peripheral, we've been talking about how sunflower should always be the big winner. It will be. Again, that's relative. You're talking about, quarter, 500,000 hectares. But corn is, at all things being equal today, corn on the margin is going to be favored. So
Corn's the winner.
yeah, so we're seeing corn move now, start to move again.
Probably
And
see a big increase in September plantings then too, right? I mean, the last couple of years, it's felt like Argentina's been split a little bit in almost more December planting than, but are they going to, do you feel
even
like as a country we move to seeing more December planting than, because it always felt like before it was September heavy, and then you'd have some catch up. Like, do you think they start planting corn here in the next, I mean, obviously if it's a good start, then yeah, right?
Yeah, and the other reason they will is leaf hopper isn't gone out of the north. So
Okay.
there will be a desire to sort of try to avoid some of the worst heat,
Yeah.
because those areas will see more corn. So, um, I think it's interesting here that, corn is probably, could you see 7 million hectares? I don't know, but it'll climb.
What is it
Um,
typically?
How was that this year? The acreage?
I think 6.4, So, people kind of, so like last October it was dry and then it got wet in Nove. And I think we were kind of like 5.8, 5.9 and ended up
Mhm.
planning around 6.5. And that, to your point, ran into really good into mid-December. And then December 16th, it stopped raining and got hot. And the crop held up very well. So this
So
should be a much better year. Yep.
let's assume the Argentina will increase corn acreage. The first
We'll see.
how
Yep.
do you say, how do you call it, the first corn is a
I mean, it's primarily one crop, but yeah, corn, I don't know.
in Spanish.
Oh, you're talking about like corn one or seed?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a corn that comes in April, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll be pushing
So
for their.
imagine that Brazil will have a very big stock
Mhm.
around April, May, and then we need to move that.
Yep.
If we don't sell now, we have to sell before the next safrinha, and then would be interesting to see Argentina and Brazil offering more corn, for example, for
In the
May and June.
spring. Which would be really
Then
good considering we have an aggressive OND program out of the US, right? Like it's
yeah,
almost like we swap
it's a
OND
use.
for May, June. Yeah, because you guys are
Yeah,
supposed to have
the
right
US will
now.
sell will sell more right now, and then South America will try to sell something
Yeah.
Yeah, we
before
didn't we
the
didn't get
crop
that big
matures.
July push with, where the basis comes apart or any of that. Um, the other thing is like I'm still kind of cautious on the crush number. USDA is still at 43. There's just a good chance with the FOB, the FAS prices rising that, if China buys some more beans out of RG, they're going to have trouble. There may not be enough between RG and Paraguay to, hit a 43 number. So just keep that in mind. Your feedlots up 5, 6, 7% year on year. So, there will be more domestic demand and, that should push into corn.
Love it. Let's feed all of the corn.
And then, with the good rains, we put a note out last night on wheat, but like if you went back 2 months, you were probably 84, 85, Australia, Argentina, Canada. And today, you got a reasonable 25% chance of reaching 90. So, that's just an additional 5 million tons of wheat that's going to have to clear.
All interesting in how it'll come out and when it will come out and what will spur it to come out. That'll be the fun part. Uh, moving over to beans, kind of talking about, what we have with this back and forth and some of what you were talking about before, Eduardo, with the Brazilian farmers 90% sold on old crop beans. Obviously supply availability is getting tight and you have 4 months until harvest. With you seeing, so I've got a couple questions. This is kind of a twofold, so I'll start first one. We saw that load of soybean meal, right, that was sold out of Argentina, or the 3 loads, the 4 loads, whatever. Once it was shipped, we discovered it was optional destination. It was really kind of the function of the contract. It wasn't necessarily going to make its way into China from the start, though it could have. It could have went that direction if wanted. What do you say the risk is, if any, or the likelihood, the potential that some of these sales that we're hearing announced by China out of Brazil, soybean wise, for October, are actually optional origin contracts? To where if a trade deal is put together, if something is fixed in the short term, do those sales get moved to the US?
Um, Probably zero.
Okay. Do you think the
Because
logistics are set? That's why I
because you
want it.
know
Yeah, like,
the customs in China they are very tough. When you need to change something, for example, BL from to other region and so on, it's very difficult. Because of that, this vessel that should go to China and then uh, went to Vietnam. I don't know. That's the point. They had to change, including Uruguay as a region, and then they couldn't
okay,
because
once it
it
was
was
listed
only
on the
Argentina.
customs. Okay.
Yeah, the customs are they are very tough in terms of if you If you have a contract and then you register that, it's very difficult to have a better copy. So I would say I wouldn't say zero chance, but it's very difficult. Knowing how that works in China customs, it's very difficult to see some different or changing the region. But
So
is this a rumor or
no,
speculation?
I'm just wondering,
No?
simply because we've seen it before where like we did China corn purchases, in 2022, right? Where
Okay.
China had bought a bunch of corn from the US, canceled, ended
Mm,
up making purchases out of Brazil, right? Or had some
mm.
optional origin contracts. It's happened before, right? Where we've had large amounts of purchases contracts made, and if it's a contract that you're writing with an ADM or something like that, I mean, obviously, once you get there, and if
I
the
would say
economics are better, would you load out of the US?
one possibility, probably, for example, Kafka could buy the US beans FOB, and international Kafka, not China, and then choose, depends on if we have a agreement or something else, uh, could sell to China when they want or to other destination. That this is possible. And then we had a rumor last week about that
Hmm.
Kafka bought something fob out of the US. We
Yeah,
don't know. It's difficult it's very difficult to know. Then we have to wait to see. But makes sense if you sell Brazil FOB and then buy the US Gulf, now we see the difference dropped it from 70 cents to 35 cents. So a good trade.
great. It ends up being an arbitrage when all this, and I'm not saying that that's what happens, but what has me scratching my head with Brazil right now is your industry, it always seems to be so domestic demand focused. Like obviously exports to China, like Brazil's an export powerhouse, but over the last several years, the focus on biofuel, domestic crush, all of these things, right now you're seeing crush margins in Brazil pressured extremely well or extremely hard because of the big export program. How do you balance the domestic needs with the strong export program? Does Brazil end up having to import more beans than what they normally would because they've shipped more, or do you think you'll be fine?
Yeah, the only country that we buy something is Paraguay. And because of logistics, which is by truck, it's not big. 500,000 tons up to 1 million tons. Then how you balance that? It's through or crushers, um, um, getting maintenance earlier, which is that was the scenario in the beginning of this month because of the very bad margins. But then we're selling biodiesel and the fees, which is the difference comparing to the export parity that went up. And the next one, they believe it's going to be better than this one. So oil in Brazil is very expensive, soybean oil, and biodiesel is very expensive too. Um, then we have this increase to 15%. So the flat price of the soybean meal went up because of CBOT, not because of the premiums. Premiums are in a very low level in Argentina and Brazil. Then that helped. Now, if we include the biofuel, the rings in Brazil called C bios, but is the same idea. The difference is you sell in B3, our board here. Then, so if you include the fees, the rings, and the better soybean meal, and the tax rebate, now You have a small margin,
Okay.
$5 up to $10 per ton. So, but including all the things, all the stuff,
So not
and
great.
they need to buy. They are very short.
Yep.
Uh, they are very short.
So the
And
crusher is very short? Is that
Yeah,
so what
most
happened?
of
How do you solve it? So if the crusher's short, the farmer's 90% sold, and the exporter has the largest book on for October that they've had
90
on record.
95% in Mato Grosso, but
Okay.
Brazil 80%.
Well, how do you solve the problem, Eduardo? Make it make sense, Eduardo.
well,
I'm
How? So you can't buy whatever the price producers want you to sell, and then you have to pay. But the real fundamental is if China keeps buying Brazil, they need to cover November, December,
hmm
and our crushers they need to cover part of September and most part of the October, November, and December.
Yeah.
There's no beans for that.
one one thing too, is going back, like, and I think this is part of the struggle, right? The cash and futures. This U.S. crusher is probably going to dump meal cheap, and it's probably going to be quite a bit of a cash function. And I don't think South America has as much capacity here in the coming months. And I think these guys who all want to bet on soybean meal futures going to zero and oil to the moon, it's not a good bet, especially as this, Brazil and Argentina probably have a function to support margins here. And the other thing on the trade, and this is why we've started writing so much about it, is like if you don't see chips move to China, I don't think you're seeing beans move to China. And
Yeah, you're
you know,
gonna
this,
have to see that Blackwell or the next level. I mean, and I think, you've got NVIDIA with that next, I think that's what they've been angling for all along,
of
is a
course, but
better processing chip.
I'm not sure China's going to be willing to rely on U.S. chips ever again. Like this could very much come the other way, and it's kind of looking more and more like that. So I just think, this idea, because Eduardo, we had this conversation, Angie, 2 months ago, and absolute minimum was 15 million US they could buy, and then it's 10 and then 7, and at some point it's going to be,
Yeah,
are we watching the wrong
the
things?
alternatives, they have
Yeah.
some alternatives. The point is this, you have to play with the odds, but now they are selling, so they are doing the rumor is this is going to be a very huge rotation
Three to
of the
five
reserve.
million, right? Or are you
Only
hearing more?
imported beans, only
Yeah.
imported beans,
Yeah.
3
Okay. Yeah.
million to 5 million. Then they have local ones. So the state companies can move beans or selling or exchanging between them to keep crushing at least up the north of China. But in my scenario now, I would say if they don't have a very quick resolution for that and a broad agreement, then China will decrease the crush for December and Jan. So it's very likely because they have a lot of soybean meal still. They are crushing at very high levels in terms of 65% up to 70%,
And they
which
have
is
been
very
for
common.
several weeks. I mean, like this is the
Yeah,
longest stretch that we've
20,
seen in the
25 weeks in a row,
yeah, so
which is
over 6 months of over 60% crush
yeah.
utilization, like is pretty
So they don't
phenomenal.
need right now more meal. The point is this, and then they should reduce the crush because they are losing money. That's one point. So alternatives: reduce the crush, the rotation of the reserves, keep buying Brazil if they have opportunity to buy something, um, and wait for a broad agreement or not.
So real quick, Eduardo, what's the margin today in Brazil if you planted full season corn or, double cropping beans, something behind it?
For producers,
Yeah.
beans around $350 per acre per hectare,
Mhm.
and corn plus 150.
Okay.
So combining 600. 500 to $600 per hectare for 100% owner,
Hmm.
which is good.
Yeah. And real quick on that Cade ruling, are they anticipating that they're going to be expanding acres on that, or is that on hold now? The soy moratorium?
Um, that's a market didn't change. Even with this decision of
Hmm.
this judge, then market is trading like we have a moratorium.
Okay.
I have a client that he's in Goiás, border with Mato Grosso, so it's at center. So you should plant soybean in the summer, and they are planting corn because of the moratorium. So it's very serious. Nobody
Okay.
nobody is there to buy and sell inputs, buy beans and sell. There's no one.
Gotcha.
Tradings they can't.
Interesting. Oh, so interesting. You had mentioned, Eduardo, real quick, kind of, you'd mentioned the biofuel purchases that can you explain that a little bit to me with the government, like how that's working right now, and what that means? Because you'd said the fees are rising or have risen. Has the government come forward a little bit more aggressive than what was expected? Like, can you explain it to me like I'm a small child, please? Because I want to,
Okay,
I
so Angie,
need to
that
understand
is,
it.
yeah, it's different from the US.
Yeah.
Here is a mandatory, and then companies, the private ones. So we have around 100 and 110 companies. We have three big ones and probably 10 middle ones, and then the rest are small. And then they have this mandatory, so they need to buy. And then we have no incentive, no money. So you have to buy, and then you're going to mix and sell your diesel. Well, how they can make money? Because diesel, it's not like the US. It's not a. We didn't have a daily change. We have one price defined by the Petrobras, and they can make money because diesel is expensive. Brazil should be lower, but now it's expensive, and then including biodiesel, they can make money. Then the in the past it was auctions. Then it was different, but now it's a purely market driven. Then they have to pay fees, which is a compensation over the export parity, and depends on the state. For example, Mato Grosso, uh, the fees jumped more than doubled from the last quarter. For then that helped, but only these can't make a good margin because soybean is expensive and the soybean meal is very cheap. So government only do one thing. Petrobras, which is the state company, defines the fuel price. And for example, the last change we had more than 1 year ago. So it's very stable. And the other point is the the mandatory. So that's the only two things government the role of the government in this biofuel thing.
So I'm not missing anything. It just is extremely
Yeah,
simple and very
it's
complicated at the same time.
no in the West it's very complex. In Brazil it's
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's almost too simple. I'm just like, I don't understand it. What do you mean? You set a price and then you set another thing. We need more acronyms, Eduardo. I need to have RVOs and SREs and
oh
FRSs
yeah,
and
these so-called letters, man.
And I still
So
have no idea what
confusing.
any of it means.
Hey, Nico, put the AI to study that and trying
Yeah,
Oh,
to
give
make
us an
things simple.
well,
acronym
then,
for
like
dummies.
we'll do like 2 weeks of like programming on that and training, and then they'll come out and change the policy.
Everything will be different. That's
Yeah.
as soon as you get
But you
it.
have no computer strong enough to understand. That's the
Right?
point.
That's just it. We need a better chip for this. We're gonna need a bigger chip. All right. Anything you guys want to touch on before we call it a week? I know Eduardo, you had mentioned ahead of time you had a question you wanted to ask of the group, and so
Two things. One is Brazilian weather, and then Nico could tell us about the this next 30 days, which is going to be very important for Brazil and the US. If
yes.
Brazil can plan earlier than the last year, and then this is going to help China to
Hmm.
cover or to make this bridge faster.
It's a
And the
smaller
other point
window.
is this: the U.S. farmers waiting for money. Uh, what do you think and the consequences and so details about
Yeah.
it.
Let's do weather first, and then we can end with the money convo.
Sure. All right. So I haven't looked closely at Brazil lately, but I'll take a look. Argentina will the last month's been probably third or fourth wettest. Like in, again, when Argentina gets really wet, like in 15, it floods. So it's not flooding, but it's, 2, 3 inches is this time of year is incredible. And we're forecasting the same for SEP right over the nucleozone. Um, Last 2 weeks ago, I was at a farm in the north, huge farm, probably one of the larger ones in Chaco, and they zero beans. You know, they'll have, they'll put in, they're double cropping, so they'll put in rotation 10 to 20,000, 10,000, 15,000 hectares of sunflower, and so again, I think that kind of gives you a flavor, but the weather everywhere has generally been pretty good. The north is dry or hot, leaf hopper, keep an eye. Um, but expect more grains, good shape. The US, I think, is more interesting. Again, like we don't need to go through it, but horrible yield guesses get celebrated for weeks and we waste a lot of time. And it's just, like the methodology is horrible. But anyways, Ohio, third driest last month, last 40 years. You've got these temps, again, one of the things that we look at is more of the relative anomalies. This in the East Coast was the hottest overnight relative to day we've on record or in recent history. We don't really care to look back before we were growing things. So, again, the surprises right now are probably still to the downside. And just some of these pockets of beans are really dry, um, and like again, I Pro Farmer basically put out a post basically acknowledging there's really no good statistical relationship with what they find. So we asked them to, provide an R squared, and we don't hear back. And I think that the beans are just a wild card. And so I think we cut 2/10 of a bushel this week. We're 53. Let's see how the weather goes. It's been very cool. Corn, I don't see any reason for us to move. We've been 185, 185 half for a month now, a month and a half. And yeah, I just don't like the weather it's been pretty good, and here we're gonna get this dry.
What do you base on those yields on?
Well, we run
Field
models.
data or satellite imagery?
We don't. So, okay. So we generally don't start pulling satellite imagery in until later. And there's reasons
So
for
what do
that.
you, so you're not using field data to come up with those yields?
We're using machine learning models but at state level and aggregated for 40 plus years of all the data. Plus
Yeah.
we look at our own, yield. We also look at different types of modeling in the sense of like what is trend in these places. Because
Can they detect crop disease?
no, like you can the no, like the whole point of like this is why like one thing I guess it's an important concept modeling is what we're modeling is on average. So there's like the models with the human input are always way more powerful. And because like we don't want them to spend their time addressing one-off stuff because you inevitably will overfit to events and then your model will say, oh, look, it predicted that, but then it'll do a horrible job in the future. So what you really want to do is predict to what we know today on average. And then all the extreme stuff on the fringe, because for the most part, when you have a big enough sample size with enough data points, what's good in one area is bad in another. They start to average out. So, we don't want to try to detect the anomalies. That's where the human and the footprint and the human with the models make these much better. The
Mhm.
idea that some of these groups, like there was a group out of Australia last year who, modeling, and then they would just use a bad yield, not really understanding what they were modeling, and their models were bad because it it wasn't going to be good this year, right? So so we model everything in the world, right? And another thing we look at is like, hey, is corn in the US this year behaving more like Europe or more like Ukraine? One's on a much steeper development curve, right? The technology applications of the modeling are far more exponential earlier in the cycle. And it's another reason why when these guys like try to detrend and say, oh, the yield would have been this back 10 years ago, it's not very valid. But you have to, so you really want to key off the deviations. But the point being is that the modeling, like in the East, like this problem is worse. Like it's
Mhm.
just we out of 6 years in Illinois, that would be on a similar standard deviation event. Four were much, three were much lower yields. One was a little bit lower, one was average, and one was much better, but we got a lot more rain. We got 35% more than normal that year versus in the 2 years that were the most similar were 93 and 98, which aren't going to be good comparisons anyways.
No. Yeah.
So the idea that this, the USDA came out, 11, bushels higher in Iowa, 5 above us in Pennsylvania, like it's a big red flag. So I mean, we're fine with our numbers at the moment, but as we kind of get here, we'll start to look more. This is where satellite data does a better job of looking back. It does a horrible job during the season. And people that use it don't, it's probably about a 8 to 15 day lag is kind of how you
Mm.
should probably be
Do you
looking at
think
it.
it's because of lack of people to do a
Okay.
better job? Very coincidence.
My guess, so we're going to have a new tool coming out that's actually going to be kind of cool because it's going to assign a satellite weighting. So my guess is the more confidence the USDA has in their other data points, survey, weather, historical, confidence in the yields, the stocks, the less they rely on satellite. So I think satellite is often a function of kind of how much they sort of need to rely on it, is what I would say aspects of the data suggest. And we can show why we say that. So satellite, I think in some areas is important. I think it's far less important in the US than most of the places in the world where they have to rely on it much more. But
Be
it's
interesting.
not a good real-time indicator no matter what. And so it's the reason that 10 years ago, everybody went and bet on satellites and those companies aren't around anymore.
Yeah, I'm at this point I'm just waiting for the combines to roll and I'll watch what cash does. Like if
Yeah,
basis
and
firms as harvest continues, then I'll just know I will have some better feelings on certain things. But at the same time, I feel like I've thought like the some of the rules that I thought were uh biblical, for lack of a better term, in the cash markets have kind of confounded me this year. Again, Brazil being one of them.
I think I think
Where I'm like, wait a minute, record crop, basis firming as harvest continues. I have lost it now.
I
But
think
yeah,
two states to watch are Indiana and Pennsylvania.
yeah.
Once you start to get a good feel, like last year we kind of keyed on Tennessee. It really stood out in the weather and the data, and they ended up cutting the way we thought in not until October though. Like keep an eye on Indiana and Pennsylvania. I think those are the two states that will give you a good indication of which direction this is going.
Most of my customers in Indiana are not excited, but I do have a handful that have caught some decent rains the last
I
couple,
have
3 weeks, and it's been okay.
subscribers who wrote me when they got that rain around, I want to say it was like the 15th, 16th, like they wrote and said this was saving. And just,
Yeah.
so I've had some very positive and negative. And I think Indiana, like Nebraska's another one, right? If Nebraska's 204, the West is going to be a little bigger. If Nebraska's 195, 194, I think we were at 195 last time, but it certainly creeped up a little. So keep an eye on Nebraska too.
On the money side, just to answer your question, Eduardo, I think that had come out with the deputy secretary or the undersecretary was at the Farm Progress Show this week. It had mentioned something about another round of payments. I think there are a couple rounds that are in the chamber anyway that are left over from like the MFP, like it's not MFP, it's ECAP. Another freaking set of acronyms. That's what it is. It's another tax thing that they've set aside at this
Now,
point.
now it's my turn. Explain to me like I would, yeah, very small.
Like a
A small child
like a
or a
foreigner
golden
who's
retriever.
relying on the market signals.
Right.
Is that linked to farmers selling anyways? If farmers sell all the beans or all the corn, and then they can still receive uh, the support.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not linked to farmer selling. It's basically
Okay.
linked to planted acres usually is how they do it. And I think if they if they do another round, it'll be based on planted acres. Probably, I think there's still more money. So there's an SDRP payment. There's two different payments. You've got an ECAP and you have the SDRP. They're two different disaster. So there's supplemental disaster relief is one, and that's tied to a crop insurance claim. So if they had a crop insurance claim in 23 or 24, then they will receive an extra round of cash depending on what their claim was and how the government determined what happened. So a lot of growers got 35% of that round last month. So there's another 65% of those funds that are waiting to be released. And then I think there's the ECAP, which is that's the economic relief payment. So that's just everyone gets that based on the acres planted in 24. And I think that initially was set up as two rounds and they'd only gotten the first round. So I think there are more payments that were already in the pipeline before. As far as I know now, there isn't anything currently in the pipeline for another round of payments, though the administration is researching how to support the industry as a whole.
Okay.
And Angie, to make this fair, one unique factor is then when they get these payments, a lot of these farmers don't want to pay taxes, so they're spending money. And which is interesting because like we're seeing our machinery markets right now are down 40-50% used equipment.
Yeah.
We've seen, auctions are, showing, that they're more concerned. But the other thing that's interesting is like, so Eduardo, like where I think this is, we have to keep an eye is that if they don't plant something and in these fringe areas where like it's not profitable, wheat, planting wheat or where they can plant cotton and, only really try to grow the 10% with irrigation and then average, the yield across the entire field. There's a decent amount of gamesmanship that could keep production higher than it should be. Is that fair, Karl and Angie?
Yeah, I would say to a certain level, you're going to see if I plant it, they will come sort of mentality. But at the same time, I think really it's just more. I mean, the basically going to go directly to the input providers either way. Like that's the worst part.
They have to
Like,
plant to get the
it
payment.
flows through. Yeah, the ECAP was you would have to plant. I mean, the SDRP would have been an after the fact sort of you would have had to plant to take. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, so I
you've
think
got to
like
have a skin in the game in order to get the
yeah,
cash from
they're
it.
getting taught that Trump's going to bail them out, but they're also now getting reinforced that you need the plant to get the bailout. So it is certainly
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
bringing
It's very,
the production
and the
economics
farmer
Yeah.
down.
selling will be slower,
Yeah.
but
If you can keep if the farmer has room to store and some of these other things and it helps with cash flow. But I mean, in reality, the farmer has ways to tap into cash with grain in the bin through commodity loan, FSA commodity loans and some other things, as well that already existed. But, yeah, I mean, we'll see what comes about, but like that'll be the part that frustrates me though, is like the SDRP payment and the ECAP payment, I believe, both were passed under Biden.
Hmm.
And so, like, everyone's going to say, oh, Trump's bailing him out because of his policies. Well, in reality, it's just money that was already allocated that had not been released yet. it would have to be another round of bailout, like another round of stimulus under Trump in order to really be Trump bucks. But everyone's still going to say that it's a Trump bailout when it was really passed under Biden, under Biden's watch. It's just slow. That's the FSA's problem in general, is it's slow to be facilitated and implemented. And now most everyone knows, okay, this is what's coming. So we'll leave input prices elevated. Landowners want higher rents and things. And so it'll be interesting. Like, farmers are making tough decisions. Yesterday I sat with with a father son customer of mine, and they'd had a landlord approach them and ask if they wanted to bid on his ground. And, it was, well, how do we do it? And I said, you don't bid a penny over what you can absolutely afford to pay and still make margin with 455 December 26 corn. And if you lose the ground, you lose the ground. And so for a lot of farmers, you can't but throwing good money after bad money isn't going to do anything. So I think you'll see different business decisions starting to happen, whether you have payments or not. But there is and there's going to be a switch changing in those base acres that people tell me will be a big difference, with the ARC and the PLC, and that's above my pay grade. I have no idea what all that means. But there's going to be a lot of things will kind of, unfortunately for me, I would say that the majority of the lobbying that takes place for a lot of these payments is done by folks that will benefit when the farmer gets the cash, and the farmer is not necessarily the one that benefits from the receiving of this cash. If that makes sense. Like, the farmer is not winning when they're getting cash from the government. It seems weird. Like, you wake up and you have a surprise $35,000 check or whatever. Like, for us, but it's gone before they even get it half the time anymore. So yeah, on that refreshing, lovely note, let's call it a week. No, we'll be back next week for sure. And I'm sure we'll have lots more to talk about. Will China be buying US beans? I don't know, will we continue to see 2 million metric ton corn export sales weeks for new crop? Because that's kind of mind blowing. All that and more. We'll see what next week brings. So if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
Bye bye.